Dear Anna, you are 25 years old, standing in front of some 1,000 people in the Logan Hall in London's Bloomsbury. You are a stone's throw away from the Institute of Child Health, where you are studying for a Master's in Global Development. You are a 5-minute cycle away from the Cruciform Building, where you began your medical degree in 2010. You're about to tell them what got you here, of how an eating disorder saw you hospitalised after A-levels, and about the unwanted deferral of your much-coveted entry to medical school, and the subsequent curtailment of it 18 months later following a relapse. You are anxious that the audience will wonder what merit there is in your talk, whether it's worth the ticket price, whether you are worth being heard, and how it will feel to tell this many people a very personal and verbal narrative of mental disorders only your nearest know about. You're talking to them. You're highlighting that because we cannot see mental illness, it is hard to understand, but that this talk is still relevant because all of us in this room seek meaning through connection. This is what you call a sense of being grounded, and that every listener here will know someone with, or personally experience, mental health disorders at some point in their life. Yours, Anna. It is true that, of the audience today, approximately 250 of you will experience some form of psychological disorder at some point in your adult lives. That's 1 in 4 of you. One member of a nuclear family, at least one of the people sitting immediately around you, one of a virtuoso string quartet. But I don't want to talk about diagnoses or labels, but rather start from an awareness that we all have a psychological self, of which we are variously aware. What is also true is that you all have the capacity to think, to feel, to write. And I want to share with you how writing is a greatly undervalued tool in appreciating our personal composition and understanding how that can become disordered. It won't come as a surprise to you that reading can be a form of escapism and that writing can be therapeutic. I could show you lots of studies that look at how the medical humanities, and by those I mean the crossover of disciplines between, say, the social sciences and literature, can be beneficial to mental well-being, as shown here. And I want to show you and share with you tools that might come to help you at some stage in the way that they came to help me. But more importantly, I want to consider why they might have helped. Mental health is still commonly underrepresented and discussed at both personal and policy levels. But things are slowly changing. As humans, we are programmed to try to keep ourselves well and others well. But this begs the question, what does it mean to be well and ill? How do you know where you sit between those? And what happens if you're not too sure? For those of you hoping for a simple answer or a magic bullet, I'm afraid I can't offer one, because I don't think there is one. Instead, I'd like to offer up Chapter 6 of Lionel Trilling's Sincerity and Authenticity, in which he adopts Freud's assertion that we are all ill. Neurosis is of the very nature of the mind. Its intensity varies from individual to individual. But one way that we can begin to address the answers to these questions is by entering into a written dialogue with ourselves through language. For me, my own process of writing out my health made me realize that external modes of control and mental disorder are symptomatic of a version of myself that is completely adrift from any solid sense of history. When I was first hospitalized, I struggled through the treatment program and managed to follow the instruction and medication regime until I had convinced myself and everyone around me that I was well enough to get on with my life and start my medical degree. It was only when I found myself back in treatment 18 months later that I realized that I couldn't simply do what I was told, which was a pretty big deal for someone who liked being liked and liked being accommodating. When I relapsed, I felt broken. I knew that following the rules had only given me an alternative system of false reality that was untenable in my actual life. More so than ever before, I felt completely adrift, completely groundless, unsure how to find a state of mental or physical well-being that was sustainable and thorough. But what was different this time around was that there were therapy classes, of which one was creative writing. Now, I'd always adored reading and writing poetry, very badly, I should add, but during those months and ever since, words became my grounding, both those I wrote to myself and for myself, and those of others along the way. Writing and revising my personal narrative strengthened a previously fragile self-awareness, and over time, I started to initiate and reinforce positive behavior change by acting as the written me felt able to. As I entered into an understanding of the strengths and limitations of my body and mind, so too did my collection of journals and notebooks grow. Although they're now stored away in my mum's loft, they became a tangible construct of who I was at that time, in which I expressed myself freely, so discovering things I never knew I doubted, or feared, or hoped for. That was perhaps the greatest thing, discovering I did actually want to hope and own a purpose. Someone once told me that the most optimistic people suffer the worst. Perhaps this is true, but just as we all sit on a spectrum of self-awareness, so too do we all vary in our willingness and ability to have hope for ourselves. So, writing to and of the self is a wonderful method of creating and establishing personal well-being and growth. Of course, this idea isn't new. Just as I opened with a letter I'd written to my future self, many of you will have encountered Leslie Pole Hartley's The Go-Between, in which letters become the substance of an alternative reality for two forbidden lovers. So too, John Clare's Letters Written from the Asylum recount his episode in an institution for the mentally unstable. His letters written during this time are frequently associated with an othering process Clare wrought on himself through the adoption of new personae and life narratives. Eric Robinson, a prolific editor of Clare, has suggested that in these letters, it is as though Clare is struggling to retain his sanity by writing down each image as it floats into his mind, which echoes true in his poem, Shadows of Taste. In living character and breathing word becomes a landscape, heard and felt and seen. This mapping of moments and territories became crucial to constituting and reconstituting both the land and self for Clare. Writing Health is a process of self-development which prompted me to establish a blog platform which encourages multimedia contributions on mental health from all people and has garnered some deeply moving and reflective pieces. Take David, a medical researcher who contributed a short story piece called Autumn, in which he tried to make sense of his role as clinical practitioner and facilitator on a psychiatric tertiary care unit. This model of writing for health offers a construct through words that can either be used to create a fuller or more representative evaluation of who you are at any given time, or as labels to distance oneself from. For instance, during my treatment for disordered eating, I was encouraged to write a letter to the ill me, which challenged what it meant to be ill and well, forcing a degree of disassociation. This became one of the most formative steps in my recovery process, allowing me to detach myself and my physical health from mental imposters. This was followed up with a letter I wrote to the future me, my future self, which allowed me to engage with the parts of me that were sustainable, thorough, and carried personal integrity. There is purpose in writing a letter. There is the need to actually create something rather than merely a process of expunging. And I want to encourage you to create a self-portrait in letters, channeling a modernist focus on the interiority of the self. Modernist writers such as Freud, James Joyce, and Virginia Woolf were among the first to prioritize the entangled nature of the self and a turn inward that is increasingly relevant today. You will see that you have a postcard in your bags. I'd like to invite you to take it out. Remove it from the envelope and keep hold of it until I finish. In 1949, the managing director of Harper's Magazine, Russell Line, wrote a letter to the then unknown Warhol requesting biographical information, to which the 21-year-old artist replied, "Hello, Mr. Lines. Thank you very much. My life couldn't fill a penny postcard." What you are holding now is the same size as one of those early 20th century penny postcards. Now, I'm sure we'd all agree that Warhol could have more than a postcard written about him these days, but it isn't about the quality or quantity of what you write that matters. It's about using words with integrity. And by that, I mean penning thoughts instinctively and without restraint, so allowing you to create a verbal self that can help reflect on or reflect who you are at any given moment. So, there's only one thing left for me to do. Dear audience, I have shared with you a biographical history, but more importantly, this talk has helped write out why and how composing letters got me from feeling completely detached to being able to feel grounded. Keep hold of that postcard, and when you can, write something. Perhaps to a past you, a future self, or how you feel right now, whatever feels right. Just write with abandon, and you never know what you might learn or the self-care you might establish. And I want to leave you with another fantastic example from the Letters of Note collection, which is about as far away from Warhol as you could possibly get. On May 4th, 1941, the renowned American sociologist Jessie Bernard wrote a letter to her first child, a then unborn daughter. It opens, "My dearest, 11 weeks from today, you will be ready for this outside world. You, listeners, readers, writers, are already living in and through this outside world. But whether you are ready or not, writing out our experiences in it can help find understanding as we grow and develop. Yours, Anna."